Live, everyone. Is this part two of the Circle Club Real Lovers collaboration? Like,
Maybe it feels like we've done a few more than that, but maybe it's just been us sending voice memos back and forth.
yeah, I think so. It's a bunch of snaps like going back and forth. But Tyrone from the Circle Club, welcome to the Real Lovers podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure to be here with you. I'm doing fantastic. It's almost sunset here in good old Massachusetts, so gonna get ready to go down for the long nap. But other than that, fantastic. We saw the creator this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Gen V. We got this writer strike going on. So yeah, a lot of good things going right now.
You know what? You just mentioned the writer's strike. I am so excited to talk about movies again because
Uh,
they finally got their deal after
yep.
146 days.
Yeah, I
With
know.
the
I
longest
was
strike in like since that I know of. So
Yeah, I honestly was losing faith, really. Like
hmm
I was like, this may go on till January.
hmm
Um, but I'm just hoping now that the writers have found a deal that they are content with, that
hmm
now the actors get the same sort of due diligence and attention and care.
yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about that before we get into our review of the creator,
Hmm.
the new Gareth Edwards. I know what I on Twitter I was fighting with people going back and forth about. We'll get into like my thoughts on that, but I
Yeah.
confused Gareth Edwards with Gareth Evans, so
Okay.
I had to go back and apologize to those people and be like, "I'm sorry."
I was
Like,
wrong.
yeah, I was wrong. But let's get into this little writer strike. Kind of like
Sure.
go into some bullet points on like
Yeah.
what was actually in their deal. Like did you go through like the contract on like what?
Yeah, so I didn't go through the actual contract yet.
Mm-hmm,
I got some of my main sort of points from Vanity, from the Hollywood
mm-hmm,
Reporter, Vulture, and amongst the different highlights, just to give a quick synopsis of what I had here was, streaming residuals be tied to the show's performance.
mm-hmm,
All shows will require a minimum of writers and guarantee employer writer length, which is fantastic.
mm-hmm.
There's a lot of protection against AI, artificial
Yes.
intelligence.
Mm-hmm,
And then they secured some little wins that weren't as like big on the screen. For example, writers get that guaranteed compensation, they get paid
mm-hmm.
quicker. They get to turn in a second draft for these movies. Like these little things that will make a big impact long term.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's also really eye opening to me. And I'm like, this makes a ton of sense why some of the quality has gone down. Like, there wasn't a guaranteed second draft of a movie. Like, that's just insane to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Bec-
I
That's insane, but it totally makes sense for how these streaming companies were operating. Because I've
yeah,
said this before on the Real Livers podcast, is that we are like the way these streaming companies were operating. They're operating more like tech companies instead of studios.
mhm,
It seems like now like with this new contract that's been drafted
yeah,
and basically signed, and the writers are free to go back to work at this point. Not the actors yet. They meet on
yeah,
October 2nd, but it just seemed like the studio's like main goal or these companies' main goal were to push out as much content as possible. So they don't
mm,
want like a second draft. They're like, we want your first thing and let's go. And it's just
yeah,
like, because they got to retain like these subscribers. But like, I'm really glad that like these writers are getting like their residuals back because that's how
hmm,
a lot of writers get pretty much make a living. Like you write
yeah,
like one show and like that will go into your pension. Like that's another thing that they bolstered in
yep,
with this contract is their pension will isn't going to be going away. So that's like another win as well. And it's
hmm,
just I I I just think it's like a huge win for like unions,
yeah.
and just like the film industry as well.
Yeah, and I'm pretty anti-capitalist, and I'm always and I'm always just thinking about how the corporation is, there's some loophole in there or something. So I'm
Hmm
sure there are some things in there, but some of these concessions seem like vast improvements.
hmm
One thing that does make me a little bit nervous or worries me is I saw something about how it'll, like, some of the bonuses and residuals be based on the equivalent of like 20% of the domestic subscriber base. and it's got to be within 90 days of the premiere and
Hmm.
things like that. And so, 20% doesn't sound like a lot, maybe to some. I feel like it sounds like a lot. If Disney Plus has 1 million subscribers, and that means that you have to get 200,000. Well, okay, is there going to be this push to grow the platforms big enough where people
Hmm.
can't hit that number?
Right.
And they know that their numbers are slowly growing because they don't release these numbers to the public, so we don't always fully know sometimes too. And
Hmm.
so, they I think the big thing is transparency. Like regardless of, maybe the next deal, we're gonna have to like argue about that percentage, that 20% number. But
Hmm.
the fact that they're even giving numbers now is a massive, massive win.
Yeah, exactly. And like you mentioned, like hitting like a certain number. Like one of the
Hmm.
big things about like the residuals is that movies over 30 million that cost over $30 million, the writers and people involved will get like a certain percentage.
Yeah.
And like I told you about this like offline, that like since like the number to hit is $30 million, I think you're
Hmm.
gonna you agreed with me. I think you're gonna start seeing a lot of like movies below the $30 million mark. And like
Yeah.
you said, Disney's going to be classifying these as
Right.
independent when they actually aren't. So
Right.
I.
Exactly. That's gonna be one of my big like get on my nerves things is
Mhm.
this like the mega indies or what they're gonna call it or something.
Mhm. They'll definitely call it mega indies. Like they'll actually brand it that. Like
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. It's like this all new mega indie for $50 million from Disney.
right. Yeah. Oh
Oh
man.
gosh.
Uh yeah, I just a huge win all around for the WGA. I'm hoping SAG-AFTRA will get pretty much like the same deal. I
Yeah.
think I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I
Hmm.
think they're meeting on October 2nd, like this
Yeah.
week actually. And
Yeah.
I don't think that the that SAG-AFTRA is going to be waiting all that long. Now that there
Mm.
is like a blueprint in place
Yeah.
for like the people in this industry,
Yeah.
like all you have to do, it seems like pretty straightforward for like the
Right.
studios to just kind of like just plug
Okay.
and chug and just be
Right.
like, okay, don't use AI for like the actors, don't replace
Right.
actors with AI.
Yeah.
It's that simple. What
Yeah.
although we've been saying that for like 6 months. So
Right, right,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, that also requires these CEOs having hearts and
Yeah.
souls, which a lot of them don't. But no, I mean, I think the writers, in my personal opinion, not to throw shade at the actors, are the most important sort of part of this entire
Mhm.
process. They're the ones who are creating the stories. They're making the characters come alive. They're telling, the details of the costume, the setting, the world that they're in. So I think
Mhm.
that they do deserve to have their deal sort of taken care of first, because
Mhm.
naturally in the sort of chain of operations, you have these writers, they have these great stories. Okay, now it's time to put these brilliant actors into these stories and make it come alive. So
Mhm.
I do hope that they get a deal. The one thing in that actors deal, and I know we're not talking about that, so I won't go too off focus. I hope that the extras get proper pay, because as someone who's done extra work in the past, like I mean, we're talking $8 an hour,
Yeah.
and it's just really disgusting to me that that's even still going on and allowed.
Yeah, I know quite a few production assistants. I know that they kind of operate right around the same like kind of like union as like the
Hmm.
as extras. Probably
Yeah.
they like if they don't get like a new contract, IATSE isn't going to get a new contract. Like if it's not going to be solid, they're going to be striking as well. And
Yeah.
which I think one thing that we should learn from like all of these strikes is that unions are important.
Totally.
Unions b- help bolster like the workforce and just
Yeah.
like support like the actual people doing the real work. So
Totally.
it's
Do not
yeah.
fall into the traps of paid politicians that
Hmm.
unions are terrible and unions get things done. Unions are
Hmm.
how it's possible. And honestly, I think the entire labor union, we need to be pushing more of this,
Hmm.
because like, this writer strike, if it shows anything, these are folks who are writing fictional pieces of work so that we can escape life. I mean, there are some
Right.
really people doing important work out here who don't have unions and aren't getting paid. So I
Right.
agree. Hopefully, this becomes a blueprint going forward. Um, One other thing that I really liked was, that I mentioned, is that all shows now require a minimum number of writers
Hmm.
and guarantee the employment length. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, that's like that was one of the bigger issues that at least Adam Conover, like one of the main like people that was like
Yeah.
the voice of like the WGA at this point, is
Hmm.
that the studios wanted like smaller writers rooms, and
Yeah.
like that's really how a lot of like writers like get their start, like with actual huge writers rooms, because you usually
Yes.
start off as like an assistant and then you work your way
Hmm.
up. And like if you are just having like small writers rooms and you communicate on Zoom and you
Yeah.
write like a script for like one episode and then you come back, you meet again in like 6 months, you're
Yeah.
not necessarily like
Training. Hmm.
collaborating at all, or having
Yeah.
like any like mentors.
Yes.
So the fact that mini rooms are no longer going to be a thing, I think that's also a huge win as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the concerns I heard was that it just made it impossible to train the next generation,
Hmm.
and it shows, and it shows in a lot of different things with Generation Z and afterwards, where there's definitely a discrepancy between, you know, the writing literacy, general sort of production value, all that sort of stuff. And again, not to say these people aren't important. It's not necessarily their fault that if the system is set up this way to not empower them or put them in success. So that is fantastic. And I'm also just glad too that regardless of Netflix or Amazon Prime or whoever's agenda, that these people will get guaranteed pay regardless. If
Hmm.
oh, Netflix has a board meeting and they're down 15% or whatever. Let's cut this show. Let's cut that show. Now they can't. So
Hmm.
that also is going to make them more willing. Okay, if we're paying these people anyway 6, 7, 8 weeks, we might as well just let them release this and see how this goes.
Right. And I think also I was thinking about this like pretty much today, is
Yeah.
that we've started to see a lot more like hikes in like streaming services, like price
Yep.
hikes. And I
Yep.
feel like I know a lot of people are upset, and I'm probably gonna get some flack online for saying this, but like I feel like the only reason we're probably seeing like these strikes and like these studios pushing people to ad models is because the writers got a fair deal,
Yeah.
because they're trying to siphon like that money to the
Yes.
writers. They were keeping it pretty much all to themselves because they weren't letting them know about any of these numbers. And
Yeah.
to be honest, like I like the price hikes suck, but I'm willing to pay a little bit more knowing that
Sure.
the writer of The Bear or the writer of the creator that a movie that we're going to be reviewing
Yeah.
is going to have a meal to eat or a roof over
Totally.
their heads. So like,
Exactly. Totally. And also if the quality of the work is going to be better overall, which it will be.
yeah.
I also am really fine with that as well. And I think what the studios and streaming need to realize is it's not the price always that is makes people upset, even though it's certainly
Hmm.
a thing, and especially in these times we're living in.
Yeah.
It's what value am I paying for monthly?
Yeah.
I think that even if like something like, for example, the creator or Gen V, why not have your first episode movie premiere? Like, why not work with some of these theaters and say, hey, let's put the first episode into theaters,
Hmm.
to get people excited a month ahead of time. Like, there's no sort of innovation, any sort of creativity going on behind the scenes that makes me want to subscribe to 7 or 8 different of these platforms.
Right.
And a lot of times when things are working, like HBO Max, they go, hey, let's turn this into Max. And you're like, what are you talking about? And like, it's just a complete rebrand. Or Disney
Hmm.
Plus, hey, we're trying to get rid of Hulu now. We want to have just everything under Disney Plus. It's like,
Hmm.
I don't like Disney. I don't like the company Disney. I don't like what they represent. And it's also very squeaky clean family. I'm going to go
Hmm.
to Disney Plus to watch The Bear. It just doesn't feel, there's a branding disconnect there. And so I just think they need to get more creative if they want people to actually pay, especially with this new sort of push to have one license per home kind of
Hmm.
thing. Like, they just need to get more creative, or people are going to be just unsubscribing.
Yeah, I totally agree. We need to bring like the hype back to like TV and movies. Like bring a weekly model back to like to
Yeah.
television. So I'm not Like I'm still haven't watched. I still haven't finished watching The Bear just because they dropped all the episodes at once, and
Yeah.
like it's like I didn't say I'm not saying that I got the show spoiled for me, but like I'm
Hmm.
afraid to like go like, and have like a conversation with someone, and like isn't the whole point? You watch something and then you have a conversation with someone, just kind of like
Yes.
the conversation that we're going to be having right now about
Right.
Gareth Edwards, the creator.
No, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's total. That's definitely what it is. Is that like just we need to have like it. The binge thing, it works for some like
Mhm.
things, documentaries, or maybe even just like a short term series, like a limited series. But like, yeah, that's something that's certainly missing. One thing that I want to segue before we get into the creator
Mhm.
is like the artificial intelligence portion of this writer strike,
Yeah.
and that was a massive win. So now in that deal, AI can't be used to rewrite a script, and also, but like if writers want to use it as a tool or a resource, that is acceptable.
Mhm.
So it gives writers some flexibility. I thought that was a really powerful move too. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not one of those people that wants to completely just write off AI and just say that
Sure.
it's evil. Like I feel like there is definitely some benefits with
Hmm.
AI, but it's not. Don't replace humans.
Yeah.
Don't replace humans because like I feel like at that point we're just going to become extinct, and
Yeah.
I,
The
I feel
natural
like
evolution of
yeah,
humanity. Mhm.
which I think is kind of like a perfect segue into the movie that we're talking about, the creator by
Yeah.
Gareth Edwards. There's
Yeah.
two segues in there, but but yeah.
But yeah, we are talking the creator, Gareth Edwards.
Hmm.
A story very relevant right now. AI, artificial intelligence is all the talk. And in this story, we have sort of like U.S. versus New Asia,
Hmm.
which I wanted to get into a little bit as well, because that was one of my criticisms. But the description that I had here was as a future war between human race and artificial intelligence rages on, ex Special Forces agent Josh was recruited to hunt down the creator, the elusive architect of the advanced AI. The creator has developed a mysterious weapon that has the power to end the war of all mankind. As Joshua and his team of elite operatives venture into the enemy occupied territory, they soon discover the world ending weapon is actually an AI in the form of a young child. I think that's a pretty strong summary of what we saw there.
Yeah, I think it's a very like apt summary of
Yeah.
like of the creator. For people that don't know, Gareth Edwards, he directed his directorial debut was Monsters, a really small independent film that really blew up like Cannes, and it's probably one of my
Yeah.
favorite films by him. I love
Okay.
like it's a very grounded like sci-fi like film.
Yeah.
The creator is grounded, but I just think it in my personal opinion, I walked
Yeah.
out of the creator thinking it was very derivative like sci-fi. Like
Yes.
I honestly didn't like the script very much. I thought like the dialogue was
Yes.
very cheesy.
Yes.
Um but the way this film looked really
Oh,
blew me away. Like
gorgeous.
shoot, who is the I'm pulling up the cinematographer, Greg Fraser. He
Yeah.
also did the Batman. He worked with Gareth Edwards on this film, and it's absolutely stunning. And
And
did
Dune.
yeah, and Dune as well. But did you happen to see like how much this movie cost?
I did, and that was something I wanted to bring up. It was about 80 million
Blows
US.
my mind. Blows my
Wild.
mind. Like you
You,
have
you
Avatar. You have Avatar that's like how much was that? Like 300,
the
400
entire
million?
US economy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Gareth Edwards is over here just recreating like a whole recreating 2065 to make it like look super futuristic. It's like I love it. I love
So
it.
yeah, and one thing, like I agree with what you said. I didn't think the script was super tight, which was really disappointing. I
Hmm.
thought my first reaction to this is I thought that there was a lot of good and interesting concepts in here that just weren't executed in a way that made me go whoa, but that I
Hmm.
thought it would. It kind of fell into a lot of the '80s sort of cliche tropes, sort of the Red Scare, U.S. versus New Asia, which is like, that
It's
in
kind of
itself.
racist. Kind of
Yeah,
racist. Like
yeah.
the
That's what I'm
fact
saying.
that like Asian people are perceived in this movie as like AI hybrids, and that they are willing to be they're okay with AI, which I like. Not to speak for them, but I don't think that they like AI as much as much as we do. Like
Right, yeah,
we all are skeptical of it.
totally.
The fact that like even like Asian characters in the creator are unalived like in this movie for like really just plot, like
Oh my
moving the
god,
plot forward.
there was
It was
some
absolutely
graphic,
disgusting.
yeah, there was some
Hmm.
graphic sort of things that I was just like, Jesus, like, the U.S. government is ruthless.
Hmm.
Like, and they are. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, there is some sort of diplomacy that has to happen here, some sort of
Hmm.
decorum, some sort of, we're just here to get this weapon, not kill civilians, kind of thing.
Hmm.
It was just Oppenheimer. It was out of control.
Well,
But
are you referring to the character? Is it Allison Janney? Her character,
yeah,
like
Allison Janney, yeah.
the white lady with
Howl.
the merc with a mouth, pretty much. Like
Yeah.
I just called her this the dude from Avatar. That's like the
Yeah.
really racist dude from Avatar. Like that's the
Basically.
character that she's playing.
Basically.
And yeah.
And but going back to like what you were talking about with the budget and the visual effects,
Hmm.
I mean, this is one of the best visual effects films I think we've gotten in some time.
Hmm.
And the way the robots looked, I love the hybrid look. I love that some robots just existed.
Hmm.
Some robots moved like humans. I like this sort of like, robots having this like ideology or moral compass of like sort of peacemakers. But
Hmm.
I felt like where it felt short is they didn't invite us into the world enough.
Hmm.
And so I think if they established that these robots were maybe a bit more pacifist, a little like less willing to fight, and it was more so that the government or the US government was sort of projecting or
Hmm.
sort of like, misreading a situation here, that could have been interesting. I think it could have been interesting if the US government sort of realized, wait, this actually is not a threat, that we can live in harmony. The thing with me with sci-fi, and I love sci-fi, there has to be some sort of message, some sort of story, and I think that's where it really, really felt flat to me.
Yeah, I think it fell flat for sure. And there's moments like in like I'll describe like a moment that's early on in the film.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like a spoiler, but the
Mm-hmm.
John David Washington character, like
Yeah.
he is introduced
Joshua.
as like someone that doesn't like AI and
Mm-hmm.
not willing, like he just wants them eliminated. And like
Mm-hmm.
there's a scene where he's like arresting like a robot,
Yeah.
and like the robot is like begging for its life. Like
Right.
do you remember that scene where he
Yeah.
was like absolutely like in terror, and John David Washington is like, he basically looks at his partner and says like,
They're not
don't
real.
give in,
Yeah.
they're not real. And I'm like, oh, and his partner like right next to him just like, oh, that seems pretty real to me. I'm just like, I
Yeah.
wanted more of those moments where it's like,
Definitely. Definitely.
because like I don't know about you, but if like a robot is like tower just like afraid, like
Yeah.
shows like emotion, then I'm gonna feel
I
feel sorry for it a little bit, just because.
Yeah, I think, and that kind of goes back to what I meant about like inviting us into the world. They should have, in that
Mhm.
first act, they really should have like. I understand, right? Like for us, we come from a generation where they're just robots. This is
Mhm.
just, open. This is a trash can. This is a car. I
Mhm.
think there should have been a better job of showing that transition of when did humanity sort of start having empathy for these robots. And
Mhm.
they tried to do it with that montage, but I felt like that's where they shouldn't have rushed.
Mhm.
I did enjoy the montage, but I felt like I needed more, like you said, those moments to make me go, no, these robots, even though they are programmed, they have some sort of free will. They have some sort of
Mhm.
decision making. They're that advanced, and that's what we were missing. Um, but going back to the visual effects for a second here,
Mhm.
so Gareth Edwards actually studied visual effects in university.
Mhm.
So I think that also is probably why he has such an attention to detail here. And I
Mhm.
also heard that they kept the script pretty tight, which is a benefit and a disadvantage. Benefit because you like they shot it all, then they did post production with the visuals. They weren't really like there was not a lot of like pre production and visual modding and stuff what you see in Marvel, which is why it kind of like they get stuck or pigeonholed. So I think that's one of the reasons it worked really well. But I think this movie kind of shows me that you don't need these like $300 million budgets to kind of achieve something that's visually phenomenal. Because that's what this was. It was visually phenomenal, and I really liked the sound design as well. It kind of took some of those Star Wars sound effects, but like made it seem a little bit more realistic, a little more authentic, and I really appreciate the sound design.
More grounded for sure.
Yeah,
like especially I feel like the strongest part. We won't talk too much about it because of spoilers, but I feel like some of the stronger emotional aspects were the third act. Everything that happened in the third act. And
really?
It like I got a lot of District 9 vibes, like in that third act where he. This is so much a spoiler. We can edit this out, but he becomes kind of like he realizes like who the AI is and who these AI hybrids are, and once you like live with them, then you become you see like their side, and then not all of them are bad, which is very it like when that started coming up, I was just like it's a little cliche and a little like I don't know like white savior like it's like we understand now, don't hate us, and I'm just
right. But no, I agree, and I thought too like the third act for me they really rushed at the end. Like it was like boom, boom, boom. Like the scenes were so fast. But within that, there were some moments I really did like. I loved sort of that like chemistry between Madeline Yuna, who plays Alfie, the young robot girl, and John David Washington. I thought they had extremely great chemistry. I thought Gemma Chan and John David Washington were super believable as a couple. I really liked them. I actually would have preferred to see more of their romance, more of their story. Ken Watanabe is always fantastic. I don't think he's ever missed. He's just so good. And like even in his short moments, he was really fantastic. There was a line that he said that resonated with me. He was like, we're not designed to kill sort of like the creator, right? And I liked that moment, but I thought what they could have maybe done with that is if we got that ideology early of like we can't kill or like, that's not what we're programmed to do. There was a mistake. And we had that, like maybe in that first act, we would have maybe had a little bit more empathy. Maybe you would have believed that the U.S. government could have changed over time. But it just, it went a route that was predictable. And I don't know if this is true. And I'm not going to sort of give Gareth Edwards a pass here. This movie felt like a movie where there was a lot of potential and uniqueness. And then like maybe the like producers or the or 20th Century Studios was kind of like, cut that. Oh, like, reduce this. Oh, no, we need a moment where the girl saves. Or, you know what I mean? Like, it felt like this had some sort of larger hands involved with it.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Although I do think that, like I said, like before, I feel like this movie started picking up a lot, like in the third act. I feel like you could have cut quite a bit from like those first and second acts because it had a lot to explain. Like I mentioned this, I believe I mentioned this on Twitter that the creator for like when I walked out of this, it basically feels like 3 short films that don't really feel like connected all that much. And I really like the third short film. Like the first two are great, but the third one is really where it brings it home.
So one of my favorite films of all time is Arrival. And do you remember that film Passengers with Jennifer Lawrence?
I haven't seen it. I've been told to watch it multiple times, but I just haven't seen it.
It wasn't great, and one of the reasons, like those two, to me, are a masterclass in editing. And one of the reasons Passengers doesn't work is because the way it's edited is up front. You see, like in the very first sort of scene, that Chris, what's the guy's name from Guardians of the Galaxy?
Chris Pratt.
Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt, yeah. Chris Pratt's character reveals that he unlocked Jennifer Lawrence's character even though she wasn't supposed to. And I think that, like, if they edit it where you found that out later, it kind of becomes this like, how could you, like, this is selfish moment, but they do it up front. And so because it's up front, it doesn't quite work. And I
Mhm.
think with this story, if we would have maybe edited where we put some things in the beginning and then we put some things towards the end, there is a good story in here. I know it. I know that there is a good story in here and that there's some potential, but I
Mhm.
think that the editing, the script wasn't very tight. And then there was that sort of guy who was working with Allison Janney's character, the other like white actor, and he just
Mhm.
had some really cliche, corny moments. And
Yeah.
with John David, oh save me, oh you betrayed
Yeah.
us, like it's just oh god.
Yeah, it's all very bad and like cringe in some moments, but like you said, like this movie has potential, which the fact that this movie only costs $80 million, I don't think it's going to make its money back, but it
Yeah,
doesn't have like that big of a hill to climb because of the
yeah,
low budget. So
right.
hopefully, like Gareth Edwards will like be able to revisit like
Hmm.
portions of this world, because I think that the
Yeah,
world that he created is really something special. I just want to see him to be a little bit more focused. Like
yeah,
it
and I mean, I'm not always one to say, wow, we need to franchise everything.
mhm,
But this is one where I'm like, this is an interesting sort of world that we didn't get to explore enough that I would like to maybe play with a little bit more. But I'd be fine if this was just a standalone as well.
mhm,
But when you, like you said, when you have an $80 million budget, I want more movies like this. I prefer movies like this to. It's so fascinating that they took a risk with the casting. It's extremely diverse. They took a risk sort of like with the visual effects, like it wasn't over, it wasn't like super cost heavy, but it just felt safe. It felt like a very safe movie, as
mhm.
far as some of the decisions that were made and sort of expectations that I really was hoping that this movie wouldn't take such a safe route, especially considering Rogue One and some of these other films felt like they did take a little bit more of a risk and jump. um I had a question. So I was talking to one of my friends of the Circle Club here, Matt on the
Mhm.
mic, and I said to him, because he's a big Star Wars fan, I was like, do you think that our generation of film watchers, moviegoers, we're so used to these franchises and sequels where we already have that background knowledge that we kind of go into those movies and give them more of a pass when they don't build up the world versus an original story?
Um, to I think that that's an interesting question. I think that Andor proves that uh we hold different standards with Star Wars, and
Yeah.
also like I haven't seen much of Ahsoka.
Hmm.
Like we want like the world to be expanded like with Andor,
Yeah.
like from the
Yeah.
success of Andor. But like when something original comes out like this, all I'm wanting, uh I just want like an interesting world that I can like
Hmm.
revisit. Not
Yeah.
necessarily revisit by like more movies.
Right.
I want something that that I could like pop in like the Blu-ray player and be like, oh, I want to rewatch this again.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question a little
Yeah,
bit? It's like,
yeah, and again, and I think that's where they fell short for me. I think if we
mm-hmm,
would have gotten a little bit more of the actual world,
mm-hmm,
and I've heard other reviewers really rave about this movie, saying they love the world building, they
mm-hmm,
loved it, and I think there is some truth to that, right? I do think that we did get some sort of interesting concepts, some
mm-hmm,
new concepts, some fun concepts. I love the idea of like this union sort of world. But I felt like we ran out of time, and then we sort of
mm-hmm,
started rushing, and I said this to my friend Matt too. I said we also now are sort of, we don't realize it, but we're watching 8 hour movies now. They're called
mm-hmm.
TV series,
Yeah.
right? And I think this, oh my god, if this was on Apple as a limited series, you got 8 episodes, an hour each, they would have done a phenomenal job. Really like taking their time and us falling in love with the characters and growing. But right now, I think the movie industry needs to kind of figure out, okay, this movie is 2.5 hours, 3 hours, really in that time, tightening it and figuring it out. And it feels like right now the movie industry is struggling a little bit to compete with that with television.
Yeah, for sure. I did say like one positive thing like about like this movie. John David Washington, like he's absolutely fantastic in this,
Yeah.
and like he was in another sci-fi film, one directed by Sir Christopher Nolan.
Yes.
I don't think
Yes.
he's
So no.
knighted. I don't think he's knighted, but we're just gonna go with it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
love that
do.
movie. Yeah.
Uh, I haven't. I've only watched it once. I
Yeah.
was not a big fan of it.
A lot of people weren't.
The
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
and I feel like this performance John David Washington has versus Tenet, I prefer like what he's doing here, and I want
Yeah.
to see more of that. Although I think that he has the potential for him being in a sci-fi movie. Like he can do better than the creator. So
I agree. I agree. I thought that's a fair point. I thought I like Tenet, but it's with Nolan. It's less about the actors and more about using those actors as his chess pieces for his
mhm,
story. Whereas the creator allowed John to like have a little bit more of put out his acting chops out there. There was some really strong moments with him and Madeline and Gemma Chan. I
mhm,
love Gemma Chan. Gemma Chan is one of my favorite under like rated like actresses out there.
mhm.
She just has a sweet soul, compassion. When she says words, you really hang on to every like vowel in phrase. Like she has like a really nice sort of prose the way she talks. I mean, like I said, Ken Watanabe's fantastic. This kid, Madeline Yuna Yoles or Voles, like she who plays Alfie, the AI, she does such a freaking amazing job to me. This is her first performance ever, and I was like, whoa, like there were some really strong moments. But then I think where John and her fell short is I think was that script. There were
Mhm.
certainly moments where like there were some cliche lines, and I found some of the best acting that they did was when they weren't talking, when they were just looking
Mhm.
at each other, when they were sort of responding to each other with their body language, and I think we need more of that. So yeah, that's my take.
Which totally makes sense because Gareth Edwards, he has a visual effects like background. It
Yeah,
make not saying that he's like a bad writer, but like he gets more of his emotional punches
right.
from showing, not telling. And I feel like this, like you just said, like when this movie does that, like it definitely shows instead of tells. But we should probably wrap up this live, or Jamie Lee's probably gonna
Yeah,
beat us up because we're
yeah.
talking about Gen V, the newest Amazon Prime show on her channel. But do you have any more final thoughts on the creator? Like, should people
No,
see this?
no. I mean, yeah, I think people should. I do think like this is going to be one of those movies that is hit or miss for some folks. I know you don't do ratings. For me, I gave it about like a 3 out of 5 stars, and that's good. It's like it's still worth seeing. I think I
Mm-hmm.
want to see more films like this. Maybe I'm being a little harsh, but I thought that like it was a serviceable film. It was great. Like there was some interesting moments. I do think the acting performances were awesome. The visual effects is alone, in my opinion, is worth seeing just once.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would definitely say people should see this.
Yeah, I think people should see this as well. I gave this a 3 out of 5 on Letterbox. I really had like, despite like my complaints for this movie, I really
Yeah,
had a decent time because John David
same.
Washington is worth the price of admission.
Yeah,
Probably not a full price, more like
right.
maybe like a midday
Yeah, a
price, like
Tuesday
a
$5 discount or
yeah, Tuesday $5 discount, or if you have Movie Pass, if anyone has
yeah,
that, just like use your free credit for that, and I don't think you're gonna have a bad time.
I agree.
But yeah, see the creator, check it out. Let us know in the comments down below what you thought of the creator. But Tyrone, to wrap this up, where can people find you online?
I am the Circle Club everywhere, TikTok, YouTube primarily, and check Marley as well. And I'd love Marley and I to get some things going more frequently. I think we have
Hmm.
a great time together. It's always really fun talking movies and TV with you, and I appreciate you having me on your platform and mine.
Yeah, exactly. We need to do like anytime you want to hop on and talk about a movie. Well, we're going to be doing it in like 3 minutes. We're going to be talking about Gen V, but
All right.
people can follow me at Marley Lives Film. You can see like the handle at the bottom of the screen. I'm pretty much on everything. Not so much Twitter anymore, but you
No.
can follow.
Yeah.
The main ones are Threads and Instagram, which is basically just Instagram, and then YouTube as well. So you can listen to this podcast anywhere where you listen to podcasts at the Real Livers Pod, or the Circle Club. The Circle Club's also on Spotify as well.
Yep. Yeah. We're on Spotify and everywhere. Just search the Circle Club. You'll find us.
Yeah, just search the Circle Club and the Real Lovers podcast and give us a rating, give us 5 stars, and even if we're doing bad, give us 5 stars and let us know how we can improve. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah.
And as we always say at the Circle Club, we love you. Be kind in the comments, be friendly, and just be you.
Yep, just be you and keep watching movies, just like we say at the end of every podcast. But yeah, have a good one. All right, see ya. Okay, end stream. That's so awkward.